Hello and welcome to SAC TV with your fifth edition of the podcast hosted by myself, TM Scotsman or Scotty, as you may be more familiar with me. And I am joined by my partner in crime, the second half of our dynamic duo. It is Eric Holdall, NMD. Lovely to have you with me here once again. Tell our lovelies where we can find you and what you have been up to recently.
Well, I guess since the last podcast, I rebranded myself. I left Humpmania. I left the NMD for Dead. Now I'm named Eric Oldal. Pretty much doing the same things, though, having a podcast here and there, doing some Twitter work here and there. Not posting too much articles lately, but maybe that's going to change. But I guess I need to add that I'm now going to be the official guest here. You seem to run out of guests to add, so it's always falling back on the truthful and trustworthy NMD, right?
Well, we say running out of guests to add, but I think it's just clear preference and clear quality over the quantity that's needed, which is why we go back to old NMD as usual. It's not just familiarity, but we are here, and we are here not just to talk about, ourselves, of course. We are here with two topics at hand, and that is going to be the most recent Trackmania Cups. That is going to be Air France Cup, of course, and TMGL or Trackmania Grand League. So we're not using fancy abbreviations all the time. Just as a starter there, before we go on to the topics, though, for any of you guys who are listening and watching, feel free to hit us with any questions in the chat, any points you think we've missed, or anything you would like us to bring up or talk about, or whatever the fuck you want. It doesn't matter. But anyway, to start us off with, at this point 6 months ago, we were having Air France Cup to look forward to, and we were also in the midst of TMGL. So if we kind of rewind 6 months ago, if we would have had this podcast now, what were your thoughts and feelings leading up into the conclusion of TMGL at that time, and hopes and dreams, I guess we'll say, for Air France Cup at that time?
Yeah, I think a good key point here or a good word is hopes and also dreams as well. If you asked me 6 months ago how I would see Air France working out, I would say it's going to be changing for our game. If you ask me about how the playoff for the then unannounced Jackmania Grand League was going to work out, I said that's also going to be great for the game. In the end, we ended up with a Air France flight that nobody was able to watch because no stream, no recording, and then we had just one match in Paris for the viewers there. So my hopes and dreams were certainly higher than the end result. So I guess you can say that depending on my hopes and dreams, I'm disappointed, but in the end, it's somewhat understandable why we ended up where we ended up. And how about yourself? How would you summarize it about 6 months ago and where we actually ended up?
Well, I guess exactly almost using the same analogy you did. I mean, if we take some fancy wording with it, I guess for Air France, with such a massive potential with it, our hopes and dreams were in the Mile High Club, but it never really took off, shall we say? Or at least it took off and it crashed and burned. So, but yeah, I mean, 6 months ago, especially for TMGL, we were kind of in the limbo phase where we hadn't heard everything about the playoffs, and there wasn't everything set in stone about the playoffs, how many people there was going to be, and also there was the issues with the players that were going to be participating in it. You know, whether there's going to be 8 or 4, whether certain players were going to be able to attend or not. So it was quite a feeling of limbo working out to then. But I mean, of course, as you say, now that we're in the future, of course, and we can look back on things, it is, some things have went okay, some things have went bad, some things have even went good. We'll dig into them as we manage to. But I guess chronologically, we kind of need to start with our beloved Air France Cup, which I'm told you were attending, or at least attempting to attend. If you would give us a little bit more as to what happened there.
Okay, that's for sure. I tried to attend, and if I'm being honest, I never tried harder to attend any event. Even it was so much easier to even get backstage at the Theater Cup. It was just to ask some people, say what you do, and say, of course, we're gonna give you some backstage. We understand that you are pretty much the only guy who does this, so we want you backstage, so we have some reliable face there, some face that the players already know. And I already reached out to Block, who is part of Draconia, who is also organizing this cup. Basically, or he was basically the guy who told me about the announcement. Then I run home from my university to post the information video about it. And since then, every other week, I asked him, okay, what is the status? Am I going to be on the plane? What do I need to get? Or how do I need to sell myself to actually get on the plane? He said, okay, we know you. We're going to try our best to help you. But in the meanwhile, just wait. And I waited, asked every other week, okay, can I get on it? He said, it looks good, but we cannot ensure you that. And that was pretty much the same story until start of October, where they said, okay, the slots are given out. You are not one of the slots. I said, okay, that sucks, but sure. I understand it's not your decision because from what they say to me is that if Block and John had a decision, they would have secured me a flight or a seat on the plane the first day because they know me, they understand me. But it seems like Air France has been in charge of the decisions itself, and that the rooms allowed to organizers and for them to change has not been too much. But 1 week before they said, okay, maybe you can buy your own ticket, which I don't remember nowadays. It was like 300 euros or so, but I don't have money for that. So, but I was pretty close to actually booking that ticket just to get on it because I had so high beliefs in this cup and how much visibility this cup could give to the game itself. And obviously, if it gives visibility to the game and I'm the one who posts it, I will also get visibility and build up my own brand. But I decided not to go, and I think in the end, I should be somewhat happy about not using 300 to 500 euros to go to that cup.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Like, I remember I was speaking to you about it, and it kind of reminded me, especially in the after, of what it was like for GWF, for the one that I failed to go to because my plane get cancelled. I was forever, very unhappy about it. Like, a lost opportunity for myself as much as the same as you were for Air France, and then it turned out to be a massive mess. I was like, I feel suddenly a little bit better about this, but exactly as you said, it was a massive opportunity for Trackmania. It's one of those things they say about the first things that happen, like when you're going for a first achievement in a game that say like they have a lot in World of Warcraft, or if you're going for the first tournament in a new game or something like that, you only ever get one first, and this
Yeah.
was the first ever tournament going to be held on an aircraft. That's never going to happen again. It doesn't matter what game you go on to. It doesn't matter where you play, like what country you play the game in. You're never going to have another first ever, which we had the opportunity of. And despite having a game with quite a small reach at the moment, to have that bestowed upon us, I think was a massive opportunity. And to have such restrictions posed upon it, like with what you were saying, that there was a lot of different people making kind of different factions of the decisions, so to speak. Like Air France were going to be the ones in charge of whoever was on the plane and all of that kind of shit. Whereas, of course, Draconia would handle all the management of the server, and if people were going to be able to cast it and that kind of side of things. But like, it's the main thing that the main theme of it is it was an opportunity missed, of course. But if we take out of account the kind of logistical issues, because that's something else we can go on to in a moment, one of the main issues which I understand was focused on the run up, which actually affected myself directly as well, was the issue with the qualifications themselves. So, of course, we understand, even being a normal pleb selves, that holding a competition in, even a normal stadium is going to be difficult. Holding in a competition in an aircraft, which is going to have to be flying in midair somewhere, is going to be a logistical nightmare, I can imagine, especially with modern day, airports and stuff like that. I was going to be taking off from one of the busiest airports in Europe,
Yeah.
like the Paris airports. Of course, that's not going to be easy, but one of the main problems which affected a lot of the players who wanted to play in it was the fact that by the time the final qualifier had finished, they still could not tell you when the tournament was actually going to be, which in my case meant that I mean, I'm not rich, like I can't just, a drop of a hat, like dump £500-600 on flying out there, staying for a few days, flying back and all the rest of that for something that, I don't even know if I would have the schedule to go to, because it's like I have no idea about it. But I mean, of course that led to us having a lower standard of tournament, but the actual standard of the tournament we'll get into in just a second. But given the kind of caliber of players that could have been had just straight off the bat, how much of an impact do you think that had with the kind of players that ended up showing up?
Well, I think if there's one thing that Air France should be happy about is the actual got some of the best players we have in the scene. You have the names of Massa, Riolo, basically two of the guys with the biggest reach, biggest names in the scene itself, and then you obviously have names like Coco, Papu, and you name it. So the names itself and the players itself is probably the best thing that happened to Air France, that they actually got those players. But you mentioned that if you qualified, you wasn't sure about going. You had two players who qualified and didn't end up going. Spam couldn't go, and then Razor couldn't go. And that just, if you remove the fact that they didn't go, it just looks bad on the organization's part that someone who actually qualifies ends up not going, so they have to give it to someone else. It just feels like something is missing. I've said it pretty much every time I see some people forfeit, like Carl Jr. at the Jackmina Grand League, the Swervis Cup where we had 4 players not playing. It just feels like the end result of the tournament missed something. I know that Air France now, if you look back at it, the competitions and the competitive scene didn't really matter too much. I don't think we can say that the best player won. Maybe Coco is the best player, but it's not like you can say that the best player won just based on the fact that they played on a plane. If you follow what I mean there.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think putting your you obviously could have names like Carl Jr. and Pack, Kappa, who is the 3 best players in the game at the moment playing. But I think Air France should be actually happy about having pro players playing there, some of the best players playing there, so they cannot be put to or say that, okay, you hosted a good tournament, but the players who played it were rather dog shit. They will be wrecked by anybody else. So this is probably one thing they could be happy about, that they actually had some good players playing on that plane.
Yeah, for sure. They had the exactly as you said. One of the main things they did have is they did have a good mix of players as well. You had your very experienced and high tier players, but you also had some players who had not been playing. Or I was going to say such a high stage there, which is a bit a bit ironic there. But you had players that were a little bit less experienced in the kind of even the multi-style competitive scene. Your prime example being people like Afe and Ellie, I believe, managed to get through as well. So, of course, Dunster having had more experience going through the Trackmania Grand League and such like that, but the primarily those two players, it was very nice to see them getting a chance in such a big stage, because despite all the issues it had, it was still a very sought after event to witness. Although, again, issues with that we'll get on to, but it was something that players were looking forward to seeing. People were looking forward to watching. It's like when you talk about the TMGL making it good for the spectators and things like that. The maps were very good for the spectators. They had a very recognizable theme about them. It had its X factor being in a fucking airplane. Of course, it's got its built-in X factor. But I mean, in terms of how the kind of expectations of the tournament were dulled by what then happened before it, was kind of outmatched, if that was even possible, by what happened during the tournament. So the updates as to what we had with the tournament, unfortunately, which for those who didn't manage to kind of keep up to date with what actually happened, in the kind of minute by minute, hour by hour basis, basically the game did not work as it was supposed to in the airplane, which I suppose is a bit ironic considering how much they struggle to get it working on the ground. So I'm not really surprised, but I mean, shit happens. I guess it's nothing that they could have really prepared for. If we're being realistic, again, it's just one of the logistical problems of having a tournament on an airplane. Basically, yeah. So it was on a live airplane, so there was people actually on the flights who were just flying to their destinations, sitting next to people playing in a tournament, which I find amusing. But I can just imagine, someone like, Massa, who's very very focus orientated, very momentum based, and then someone just barges over him because he needs to go for a shit or something like that, and then that's it. Everything's ruined. Massa loses his shit. Like that's what. Obviously, I wasn't there, so I couldn't imagine that exactly happening there. But it was again just another thing that didn't work as much. Of course, apparently there was a lot of input lag with the kind of controller of the game, or so to speak, whatever it was that was driving this, and the main issue being that the actual rounds mode of which it was intended to have been done in did not work. So the way this tournament actually ended up being done was 5 minutes on, I think it was one of the maps, or maybe two or three of the
I
maps.
think two maps at least.
Two maps, yeah. So 5 minutes each on time attack in solo mode. So the only mode that would actually properly work, and then whoever got the best times in a combined 10 minutes of time attack did actually win, and of course turning out to be Coco. So it's one of those things that kind of puts a bitter taste in your mouth when you're thinking about a tournament as a whole, and it's kind of a point you made there, which I'll bring into. It was a tournament, you had the kind of players in it where you're not going to be saying, like, say Coco won because the rest of the competition was shit, for example. That's not the kind of tournament we're going to be seeing, because there was very high tier names there. There was your Velo, who's very, very good in multi styles. There was Massa, who one of the fastest kind of hunters, so to speak, as we've known in Trackmania. And a lot of people who are very, very well versed on all of these maps, and could have advantage of that situation. But the main thing that we're missing from this is that we're thinking this is a 5 minute time attack on two maps. There was more maps in the map pack that just didn't get seen whatsoever. But the main thing missing is here, we've never seen these players go up against each other on these maps in the final. So we don't really know who was the best player in the final. That's the way. That's the impression I get just on the way the tournament actually panned out. As in, it was just 5 minutes of a. If this was a tournament format from the start, then I would have easily been able to say that won't work. Like, that's not going to show you who is the best player. That's not even going to give you a good spectacle. But would you say they did the best with what they had, or would you have preferred to see some sort of other way of them kind of going about that?
From my understanding, it's once they landed, Wingo Bear said that there is some settings about how big the screen is or how big the game in the screen is, and if that is fixed to the pad they played on, then apparently the input lag itself is so much less that is somewhat more playable then. So if they just had checked some more things before, maybe gotten somewhat more lucky with the things they tested, maybe not the player with the least amount of lags and the most FPS would have won. But I don't know. Once you spoke about it, it just feels like if you look back at the NES, they had the qualification where they drove a go-kart to have the seating. Once you look back at it, this just feels like a seating for a tournament that was maybe taking place at the airport itself. Just not really something competitive, not really something you can look back at and said, this is Trackmania, this is the competitive game of Trackmania, and what we hope for to show the world our game to get more visibility. But in the end, I find it hard to actually put some good points about this tournament in the end and how it can work out. And if you can fix some small things that maybe a little bit more input lag, I still think if you just have, like you say, 5 minute time attack on two maps, it would just feel weird when the whole qualification was based on cup mode and the whole competitive scene is based on cup mode and driving head to head instead of a 5 minute time attack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's kind of ironic, as exactly you said there, a bit of seeding. I suppose it was almost like the roles would have been reversed. Like, the seeding is going to be the Trackmania on the plane, and the final is going to be flying the plane. They land, and the last one's out and have crashed. But yeah, I mean, we did see Coco taking the win from that. Of course, with the actual standings of the tournament, it looks good because the strong players did get good positions, so it's nice to look at it in that way. But again, the main thing I said, just to summarize my thoughts about Air France, was it was a missed opportunity for all parties involved, because the way it actually turned out, I think, was quite a poor advertisement for Air France, because of course that's what they were going for. I mean, as to how much they care about, Ubisoft or Trackmania's competitive scenes, is of course something only they will know. That's not really something I can comment as much about, because I've not got a clue. But they were doing it for their own benefit, of course. I mean, but it doesn't seem to be it was much of a benefit to them. It didn't work as well as it should have. The another point as well, there was no stream of it whatsoever. There's not even a VOD of it, as far to my understanding, of course, because you know you can't make a VOD of people on solo mode unless you're doing it one by one by one by one.
Yeah.
But that wouldn't work either. So there's no documentation. There's no visual representation of that cup whatsoever, apart from a few photos that were taken during it, before and after it. But even still, it gives a very poor representation as to how it went, what the experience was like on the plane. So we kind of need to rely upon what the players were really saying themselves, and they enjoyed the experience at the very least. I suppose that's been the positive thing. As to whether or not they were satisfied with how the tournament went for themselves, of course, performance-wise and stuff like that, I suppose, is a bit of a side matter. But as far as I'm concerned, I think it's fair to say we're not going to be seeing any airplane tournaments in Trackmania again. I think you'll agree with me.
Yeah. But what you bring up there is that this is maybe not the best marketing for Air France, and maybe didn't bring a much visibility as it could into the game, because this is the first esport tournament. That was also what I thought in the start, that this is something they're going to promote the hell out of, because they are going to be the first. This is something that Ubisoft are going to promote the hell out of. But just some weeks, or the week before, I was told that even Air France told players that uploaded world record clip, like Papu uploaded 2 days before something, a clip of himself driving a map. Air France wasn't happy about that. And maybe that's the reason why I wasn't allowed on the plane, because from my feeling, it's just like maybe they didn't want that much visibility about the cup, in case it ended up like it did, which is total failure, because a total failure put to their brand is not good, even though they are the first. They're just going to be the first to fail at something instead of being the first to host a successful esport tournament. And even after the tournament, I was trying to do some asking of people and such. And my understanding is that they don't want people to speak too much publicly about it, to say bad stuff about the tournament, to say stuff about the tournament overall. So maybe Air France is happy about that there is no VOD, maybe not a lot of visibility. I think Air France is just something in the Jackmania bubble at the moment. Nobody outside probably knows that it happened. So Air France just moves along, doesn't see this as a failure nor a success, just something that happened. But the Jackmania people are obviously looking at this as a failure, besides the players who maybe attended and got a nice experience that they could tell to their grandchildren.
Yeah, I suppose that's a really good point. I mean, of course, you'll know a lot more of that side of things from your kind of journalistic pursuits, if we'll say then. But I mean, it's yeah, I guess you're right in saying it's within our bubble. It's something that's going to be highlighted a lot by us, because we're the ones who are a key part of this. It was our
Yeah.
game being played. It was our players that were going there. I say ours as if as a collective, like the Trackmania community, so to speak. It was our streamers that were there. It was Draconia, the organization we're so familiar with, that was getting so involved in this. And of course, that's and again, I agree with you in a sense it's now a bubble, and I also agree with you in a sense that, like, if I was them and this bad, it happened this badly, then I would be sweeping it under the rug and just try to forget
Yeah.
it ever happened. To be honest,
Yeah,
I
you haven't
wouldn't.
heard anything after the tournament either. Like in the Discord, it's basically the last message in that Discord is you pointing 8 question marks. Nothing besides that. It's not summarizing about why it went wrong, about if there is going to be a next edition. There's nothing at all, so they just want to forget about it.
Yeah, I forgot I was the last one to write in that, and I wrote in that because I didn't even know what the results were, because they hadn't
Yeah,
they hadn't even posted the results, and they hadn't even posted the results anywhere. They hadn't posted any information about that whatsoever after it, apart from, I think, one photograph of that was highlighted earlier in the stream there, as you saw,
yeah,
with the top three players. But I mean, again, such a missed opportunity for us. And again, I would say for the higher parties involved in this, Air France, Ubisoft, Nadeo, a missed opportunity for them because given the fact that that it was pointed out by Wingleby, as you said, that there was just some small settings that could have been optimized. I feel if there was a bit more hands-on able to be had with the systems that were being worked, as much as I understand how difficult that would be, but it could have worked a lot better than it did, in my opinion. At the very least, of course, I'm not in the inside circles and that, but even just looking from the outside and seeing what went wrong, I would sit there and think that there's definitely some things that could have went better on this, but I mean, it's over now. As you were saying, there's not any inkling of what's going to happen going forward, and I don't expect there to be anything happening going forward. I would at least hope the likes of the organisers of likes of Block and things like that get themselves involved in other projects, despite the amount of issues we had here, because uh, at least through some of these opportunities that are getting thrown at us, it is presenting a good light in terms of Trackmania that I would kind of try and find as a silver lining for this is that the game is then worthy of these opportunities. It's not just something that people are completely ignoring. It's not an esport that doesn't exist whatsoever. Well, an esport, I guess, a bit of a convoluted term, but it's not something we're looking at where Trackmania is just completely insignificant anymore. We were selected to be a tournament on an airplane. We
Yeah.
are getting these spots at big tournaments like TMGL, of course. Oh, sorry, at Paris Games Week and things like that. So, if opportunities along the same kind of scale as this keep coming, then we've got a few good things to look forward to. I mean, not that I expect fucking like British Airways to come along with another offer, but would you kind of see? Would you agree with me in seeing that as a saving grace, or do you think I'm just kind of I'm almost begging for a positive to this?
No, no, but if you look at it, the end result is obviously negative, the
Yeah.
competition itself. But like you bring up, the positive part is that Trackmania is actually picked as the game to be the first esport tournament on a plane. There's multiple esport games out there. That's why I was so surprised when the announcement was made that Trackmania is going to be the game. And it's not going to be like at the C event by Serrator, going to be 1 out of 10 games on a plane. It's going to be the only game on that plane, and that's maybe why people in Trackmania also got so hyped that okay, our game is finally being picked to be brought out to the spotlight, out to the mainstream audience of esport, maybe out to the mainstream audience of the world. Maybe my mom would have written about it in the news, but in the end, we didn't have any
No
article.
one read about it.
Yeah, I mean, my Twitter post is basically the only thing that's posted after that cup, and maybe Block also posted something about the full results list. But yeah, if you look at the positive, I think that is the positive part, that Checkmania is maybe somewhat more relevant than we maybe think, because we got picked to this. Obviously, it's in France. The game is made in France. We are somewhat big in France. We saw that at the ESWC straw poll thing, that Checkmania is actually more popular than we might realize inside this hardcore esport bubble. That maybe there is something outside of this as well that people notice, and maybe we get more opportunities. But if opportunities like this, when you get your hypes up and then get crushed in the end, I will take it anyway. But uh, just get some more hype out there, maybe more opportunities. But hopefully it works out better in the end, so we actually get some more attention to this game, because that's what we all want, what we all need.
Yeah, exactly. That's the end goal. I mean, uh, pick you up at that point as well. There, I mean, like people like us. I mean, we'll take it in the chin because, of course, you're committed as well to this. I mean, you've been going to all of these events. You've been covering all of this content and things like that. So people that are very very invested in the future of this are going to stick around when these opportunities even do go to dust, which is of course very disappointing. I mean, I'll stick around, of course, as I'm very invested in attempting to play in these, and even just as a spectator on the outside, I want to see Trackmania doing very well, of course. I want to, be there along with the success, be it in a casting, playing, or even just sitting here in a podcast with NMD here or Eric Holdall, as I suppose you've now rebranded. Don't let me forget. He's rebranded his name to his name. But
So
yeah,
much easier to remember.
even for you. But yeah, I mean, like it's my main concern about that in terms of the opportunities going to dust is your as a community, as our Trackmania community who are used to your minorities going, oh, it's a dead game this, it's a dead game that, or this is leaving so it's dead now. Like dead was such a very common word that was used, despite, I mean, arguably within the past few years it's kind of recovering to a state. Whether it's truly going to continue rising, I'm guessing 2020 is going to be the year of which we'll see that. But it's something that if we are going to have continued opportunities, like big opportunities, like of course, I would say TMGL is our next big opportunity. Of course, the beta season just happened there, which we'll go on to in a bit as well. We're seeing opportunities coming up for some other disciplines, getting some good investment into them as well, like the Full Speed League now. We need to see these other opportunities paying off because eventually the community is going to get tired of it. They're going to get tired of they're not going to invest as much in these opportunities, not going to invest as much in watching and playing and having the same kind of enthusiasm for it when they've been let down so many times. But overall, I would say I would guess it would be the best kind of thing along with Air France's approach to just kind of sweep it under the carpet. If I would say, I mean, of course, as you said, it's a good experience for the players to then tell their families. That's a cool thing to be able to say that you played a tournament on an airplane. There's a very 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 small amount of people that are going to be able to say that. So very very happy for them to be able to say that kind of thing. I mean, let me see. But I mean, in terms of the event itself, I mean, yeah, I would say just best is kind of swept under the rug, so to speak. I mean, it happened, it didn't go as we wanted, and many different facets, but we're moving on to bigger and better things, and moving on to, I suppose, bigger topics now. I guess with our Trackmania Grand League, which actually happened, I believe it's only 1 month or even a few weeks after Air France Cup.
Like 3 days.
Or 3 days even,
Yeah.
yeah.
The
Uh,
Wednesday and
I,
Saturday.
yeah, so I suppose that was a tight schedule for the likes of Papu there, who's actually
Yeah.
participating in both of them. But I mean, first things first, we'll take a kind of a broad look at the beta season just quickly, as I, of course, went through that in previous episodes in regards to this. What were your expectations going into the grand final based upon what you'd seen in the beta season so far? I mean, in terms of a player's perspective as well as the kind of standard of the tournament that we were looking at.
So the grand final itself, not the playoffs. Yeah, okay. I think the grand final itself had a question of who is the best when it's just one match. They are traveling to Paris just for one match itself, and then win or lose, you don't have a loser bracket to come down to. You don't have a semi-final where you can test your waters against. Maybe Pac wants to test how good is he prepared to the names of Kappa, Papu, and Bren. Now you just have to go straight into the grand final itself, and then everything is decided there. I actually thought that maybe Pac was going to be the best player in that final. I said it to you in Prague once we was playing the mini golf that, okay, now Carl Jr. has forfeited. He has given the slot to Pac. Now Pac is probably going to train the hell out of what he can, just prove himself that he wasn't knocked out because he's a bad player. He wanted to prove that he is actually the best player. But in the end, it was Kappa who shows how dominant he was. Once it comes down to just putting your mind on one goal, it seems like Kappa has something else to mobilize himself to that goal. He wasn't the best in the group stage. He was actually the biggest disappointment in my own eyes. He was almost knocked out there if Cap didn't choke on that last map. Kappa wouldn't have even made the playoff, and now he's dominating the grand final and winning it. So I know maybe it ended up like we expected. I saw in the betting league, a lot of people actually betted that the match would play out in that way, that it was Kappa, Papu, Pac, and then Bren at last because he's now living in Australia. But yeah, besides that, the expectations and the reality of the grand final itself, I think, ended up pretty much as expected, just one match. But this stage was maybe a little bit smaller last year. But besides that, I guess nothing really Not like Air France where expectations are like day and the reality is like night. Here was like expected, I guess.
Yeah. As I think that was, of course, the information was a bit more set in stone for this going forward. We heard a little bit more information on it in good time. You know, we were prepared for what we were going to be seeing, so to speak. Of course, out
Yeah.
with the player performances in terms of that. We did also have the issues, same within Air France, of players dropping out. Of course, you had
Yeah.
Spam,
Yeah.
who was who. So, well, first of all, you had Carl Jr., who was the winner bracket final winner,
Yep.
who was not able to participate. So his slot ended up going to Pack. And Spam also was extremely close to qualifying for the grand final. However, if I'm right in saying he wouldn't have been able to attend to it either. So even if he did get there, his spot would have went to someone else anyway.
He qualified to the grand final as the number 2 in the consolidation final.
All right. So was it Bren who took his spot then?
Yeah. They played for the third place. That's why Pack and Bren was in 1v1 where both failed.
Right, I see. So yeah, I mean, eventually, of course, both of them ended up getting through to the grand final, grand final anyway. But again, that's does put a little bit of an asterisk. So when you look back on it and you see now that, of course, Kappa won the event, Papu had a very strong performance to get second. You know, Pac had some issues. Pac had some issues. Well, sorry, it was Papu actually had some issues in finals, if I remember correctly. But would this all have happened if Spam was there? Would this all have happened if Carl Jr. was there? You know, uh, as in, you know, we'll always have that question of if and how that would have changed the match demographic. You know, like that's my kind of better feeling of it. But I think, yeah, it was pulled off as expected. I like the stage was a bit smaller, as you said, but it kind of reminisced me of, if you well, you'll remember the Giants Cup setup where it was a smaller stage, but I mean, this sounds corny, but it was a bit more of an intimate setting, as in there's a lot more people packed into a smaller place rather than, and it was closer to the stage than normal, rather than just being a stage a million miles away from fans who you're not hearing because there's not enough of them, for example. Whereas like Giants Cup, it was in an amphitheater basically with like 150 people, and and all shouting their heads off. That's the kind of atmosphere I'd ideally want, and that was you kind of got a nice middle ground there. You got a good bit of people, not the biggest stage of which we would have been wanting, but again, it's steps we're making towards this goal, and it is a beta season after all. We're not going to be shooting ourselves straight up just yet. So I would say. Overall, it went pretty successfully in terms of how the final was pulled off. Again, I do feel a bit empty in terms of it being one match. The players coming out just for one match. That being all that we see at a LAN event. Now, I mean, I can only imagine. Thinking of going out there for essentially 1 or 2 hours worth of something I'd be watching. It's not like, say a gamers assembly where if I'm playing for, Saturday, and if I manage to qualify Sunday, and then then you've got all the different tournaments to watch on a Sunday, for example. There was no other matches of Trackmania to watch. There was no other disciplines of Trackmania to watch. So I think in future, that type of event either needs to have a stronger representation at a LAN event, or it needs to have more support from the community, as in what we might now introduce now is the Open League, perhaps having some role at the same LAN event to make it worthwhile for people wanting to go and watch the event, so they're not just going for one match or something like that. But we'll go on to the kind of new things we've announced here and there in a moment. But I mean, if we'll kind of summarise how the beta season actually went, I mean, over a lasting impression, I mean, if I'll start off by saying, I think it it's been a very bumpy road to get to where it is now. That, like, of course, through the early weeks there was a lot of controversy through the nations qualifiers, through the maps being very divisive, through the attitudes of a lot of different people, as in people in the community, Nadeo themselves, well, specifically Hillis, of course, Softy's role and all of that. There was a lot of kind of conflict and a lot of conversation at the start to get ourselves on the right track. There was changes made, So like I say, it's been a very bumpy road to get there, but in the later stages, it did turn out to be, I would say, it was a nice spectacle to see. There was stakes on the line, which made it interesting to watch, and I can imagine interesting to play. Uh, the I mean, as a player's kind of stance, I look at the format of the Champions Mode and I kind of cringe a little, but I can understand that from a spectator's point of view. It's exciting to see, some guy's going to fuck up and lose everything. I mean, as I say, it'll be terrifying as a player, but it's interesting to watch because it's like car crash television, isn't it? I suppose that's a good analogy for it because it's exciting because of how people can fuck up, I guess.
Yeah.
But I would say of course, it's been a positive influence for the community in terms of it's a big tournament that they can focus their eyes on again. It's a big spectacle. The nitty gritties and the details as to how that's affected the wider community is quite a big part. But overall, I would say it's been positive. How would you feel about it?
The Jackman and Grand League. I think
Overall.
I asked like overall I asked the question in my Discord myself. If you had to choose between having Jackman and Grand League and then having the support of Nadeo or nothing like we had before, what would you pick? Most, or I think everybody besides maybe one or two pick that they obviously want Nadeo to support the tournament. So the overall feeling is, of course, that this is a good thing for Jackmania. We have the biggest cash prize in the Jackmania 2 Stadium's history, one of the biggest cash prizes in Jackmania's history. So that Nadeo is actually involved overall is the fundamentally good thing. So the fundamental part of this tournament is good, but like once you brought up the question about the grand final, I thought it was just about how it played out and my feeling about it. But like you said, Carl Jr. wasn't there. I feel like that is fucking weird that the best player in the world is not there, and that is something that they should have planned on, made it more public in the start. They should have once they have used since February until November to say that this is a public friendly tournament. They should have had something that the public could actually watch in real life and not only people from Paris feeling that it's worth going to a match. Because if you are even from Germany, which is a lot shorter to travel than from Norway, to go to Paris just for one match it just feels useless. And what is the viewer friendly in that? That you just have one match that you can see your idols, your heroes play, and then you have to leave again. So there is, like you said, there's small parts that is bad, and those should be fixed. But the overall concept of it is good. And the qualification is, if you ask me to put the worst part, is that the qualification was nation based and not that the best players could actually play it. I think that now they have 16 selected players, so that maybe might be not even better than having at least some sort of qualifier. But yeah, I don't know. The overall concept, of course, is that it's good. Is something happening in Jackmania. You have seems like Carl Jr. is now motivated because he said that he doesn't like to play tech anymore. The same with Pack. You also had Spam, who is one of the players who surprised me the most this season. Third in the group stage, qualified to the grand final if he had went there. So to see that the players who has played tech for so many years get more motivation to play again is nice to see. But then you obviously have the other side of the story that you have some Jackmania profiles in the game that is leaving the game because they don't feel like this tournament is a good thing, and that Nadeo was basically shitting on the tech style that has been the competitive style for so many years, and then they just go on with something else instead of using what the community has built over so many years. But I'm one of these people that just want to see Jackmania get popular, Jackmania getting out there. I don't care what style is there. If it's full speed, if it's dirt, if it's tech, if it's multi-style, even if it's Serrator's own map pack that is going to be the most played maps. I don't care too much. I just want the game to be out there because I love the game. I don't love just one particular style.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a very good point there, is in terms of how that's directly affected, how TMGL's directly affected the community in terms of, well, I suppose it specifically has then been the map styles. Of course, that's
Yeah.
affected who's played it, that's affected who's interested most in watching it. And yeah, you mentioned there with your community profiles ending up leaving with the likes of, I think it was Mass, Roa, Papu, I think Omnipots as well. all announced their retirements from the game following the what was that again? Following Zero to Hero. Well, at least I know Mass and Roa have. Forgive me if I've misrepresented the others'
But
words or
Papu is
anything
not a
like that.
Papu dirt player, right?
Of course, Papu,
Yeah.
old Papu.
The other one, yeah. So people in the chat don't get like, oh, Papu is after his second place, he's now gone.
Yeah, so I suppose you're my spell check almost with that, yeah. But yeah, old Papu, not Gamers Origins Papu. Don't freak out. It's all good. He's not retiring after TMGL. But the Papu being, of course, the Papu from years gone past. I believe he's in talks. Very well known player, especially in the French tech scene. And generally, a lot of the people who were involved, especially with the Giants Cup organization, the Trackmania side of the eCorp staff and things like that, have decided to take a step back from the game as a result. But also, you see the tech community, if we'll focus on them just for a second, losing its profiles in the sense of spam. Real, sorry, I was about to say real there. Yeah, and there's like,
Nice meme.
no, yeah, nice meme. But so Pack as well and Carl Jr. Of course, stating that they're not really as interested as much in tech anymore and things like that. And I perfectly understand where they're coming from. Of course, this style, because the way I look at this is, of course, I've not played as long as them, and I've not played as much as them, but even I can feel that when I've been playing tech very consistently for a long period of time, say, a few months at a time, even just going out to play a dirt map or a full speed map or even just a LOL map is so much more refreshing rather than just tech all the time. That's why I would feel besides spam's popularity, the weekly cups were so popular because it was a breath of fresh air. It was something new to do, something new to see. But that also kind of makes me put a bit of an asterisk under how they've kind of viewed the TMGL situation. As I feel they're of course going to be more inclined to support that because it's fresh for them, rather than someone who is then coming from a multi-style background supporting that, and then say they would support it, of course, because that's what they like doing. That's just the kind of a drawback I look to that situation as. Is I would feel that they would always then move away from the tech scene if there was something that was fresh to them. Like they would. I would at least enjoy it more for the time I would then be playing it. But that's just another point I thought about when I was seeing them announcing like they didn't have intentions to play tech anymore and such like that. But to kind of bring it on to another point there as what we were saying.
Yeah, but before that, I spoke to the one who won the playoff, the Kappa. He's obviously a guy who loves tech. He loves to play it. He says that he maybe doesn't like to play these maps, but because these type of maps is the main competitive style, he just want to compete against the best. He just want to compete, and this is where the competition is happening at the moment. So even though he is not too fan of the maps, he would rather play tech like he grew up with playing. He's still playing just because this is the competitive level of Jackmania at the moment. This is where you can prove that you are the best. And
Yeah.
that is what I'm find surprising about more people. I thought more people like to play Jackmania because they wanted to prove themselves to be the best instead of just playing because they like the maps itself. But I seem to be misunderstood there. I even get thought that I have no idea what I'm speaking about. But at least Kappa support me in the way that okay, he just want to prove himself that he is the best. He just want to feel the feeling of winning the biggest tournaments instead of just winning a tech tournament. He want to win what is the most competitive tournament. So I'm surprised there that more people are not agreeing with his mentality there, that they actually just want to compete in Jackmania instead of playing just the maps they self love.
I suppose it's very interesting when you look into that side of things. If we'll go into that for a bit, because it's like when you look at the Zerator Cup, for example, the Zerator Cup is always very, very fiercely contested because of the sheer scale of participants, the massive amount of interest from the French community. It's always got a good prize pool, you know. So there's always a lot of international involvement and a massive French involvement in the Zerator Cup. So what I found interesting about that mentality, I mean, I'm on the side of things where I would always then prefer to compete. Although pardon me, I was in the camp when this first came out, where I didn't even attempt to play the UK qualifiers back when TMGL was first announced, the nations qualifiers. I mean, of course, I've got reasons in regards to that. As to when I first started, I was one of those people that, bashing on about the maps. I didn't like them. I didn't think this was right and things like that. And also, I had the small problem of having one slot in UK and having a world champion as my only other notable opponent, so to speak. So, I mean, I suppose it was almost kind of doomed from the start there, but I didn't make my attempts to go into it. I played the match for a few hours and then I just completely lost interest in it. So, I mean, I'm guilty for that, but what I find is the most important attitude to take, especially for these kind of events, especially when there was a spot going up for grabs, and I think it was Sky left
Yeah,
the
or not
during
left, it was
mid-season.
kicked basically.
Yeah, when it was kicked, is that yes, it is the most competitive tournament, and even for your hardcore tech players, it's not as if your world's getting turned upside down when you're going to play these maps. They are notably different, but they will contain familiar techniques, familiar lines, for example, that you'll then be used to playing. It's just some of the parts are more extravagant, shall we say. They're making use of different styles. It's not the typical multi-style approach we're used to seeing. So I think the attitude that I would then say on this is you definitely need to try it and you need to give it a good try. And that's what I done. I was bashing on it at the start. I gave it a decent try when the open qualifier came, not as much to then actually properly qualify, but so that I could have an educated response to it. I knew what it felt like. I knew what the maps were like when they were trained. I knew what the tournament was like when it was trained, which I feel that some people from the outside looking in are bashing this without having given it the proper chance. But there is still some cases in it that do need people from the outside to look at it and then point out these sort of flaws or these sort of possible improvements and things like that. But in terms of how that works out to a competitive aspect, I would always like to see team players, going for the most competitive tournaments. But would you say the influence on these type of tournaments was mostly brought then from that people were, say your Spam, your Pack, your Carl Jr., the ones that were saying they weren't as interested in tech? Would you feel that their involvement would have been less so if this was a tech tournament on this kind of scale? If there was an alternative of the sort of a multi-style, because that's the argument I kind of look off for this. If there was a tech tournament and a multi-style tournament at the same time, I reckon they would have still went with what they were more comfortable with. But I mean, I'm not them. I mean, for all I know, they could have just went for something that feels more fresh. But how would you kind of, like, with the point you were making there about the most competitive tournament, how do you feel that kind of played as an influence on the people who actually did participate in the later stages?
Is the question if, let's say, Carl Jr. had the choice to make about, or should we have Jackmania World Championship 2019 or Jackmania Grand League? Is that what you're asking me, or?
Well, no, basically, with what you were saying there about, the influence of it being the most competitive tournament was why Kappa was extremely interested in playing it, despite the fact he didn't like the maps.
Yeah.
Do you think that was one of the biggest factors in why some of the biggest personalities were so involved in it? That it was the most competitive tournament, or do you believe that the maps played a big factor in that? As in, because it was a fresh map style, we saw Pack being more interested, we saw Carl Jr. being more interested, or so on.
I think the top players and the players who have done best in the Jackmania Grand League share the mentality that Kappa has. They just want to compete against each other. They just want to play against the best players in the game, and it seems like the best players of. If you look at it, the Jackmania World Championship, I believe the top five, no, the top six actually. Only Tween was the only one who wasn't in the Jackmania Grand League at some part. Massa obviously qualified after step five. So it seems like those people doesn't really care about if it's tech or if it's anything else. They just want to compete in Jackmania. They just want to prove themselves to be the best. So I think they like. I think Carl Jr. I think Pack. I think Spam. They just jumped on this because they saw this as a good opportunity for the competitive scene that Nadeo is coming in, Nadeo is supporting it, is getting a big tournament, and not really caring too much about the map style itself. They obviously, some of them have said that the maps are not the best, it's not the proper mix style, but they still support it because they maybe see in the future that this is going to be something greater if you just survive and tweak some shit here and there, like losing points. And I think that's something we all should maybe try to not just see in the moment we are, and maybe look into the future itself and not just bash on the project that is announced. I mean, we are probably two of the most vocal guys out in the community once it was announced that maybe this is not the best, maybe the maps are shit. But I'm gonna be honest. I said it in the podcast with Softy. I said it's respect for him to actually standing in the shitstorm he was in when it was announced, to actually still believe in his project, still try to get the word out there that this is, maybe just test it out, see how it works, and if it doesn't work, we're gonna move back to tech. And they didn't move back to tech, so maybe they believe it works great, and maybe they have a long term visibility. But yeah, the question itself was that if the competitive players would have played this, if it's just mixed style or if it's for the competitive side. And I think just want to compete against each other and beat each other. I think there is some real rivalry between the best 5 players in the world to see who is actually the best. If you put the RPG map, they will probably be the one who train the most there as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the kind of competitive spirit that got these players to being some of the best players in the world in the first place. You know, it's unique to find players that will have that kind of effort and have that kind of drive to go in. I mean, for example, Kappa's always one of the ones going to a LAN event where you don't even want to ask him how many hours he's put in because like it's always going to be more than yours. You know, he's one of those people. But again, it's all the more deserving for how he's managed to then pull it off in this tournament. And exactly what we were saying quite a while ago, that his, you know, that's what gets him here. You know, that's how he's managed to do this. When he's singularly focused on something, he is one of the best players to touch the game. It's as simple as that. For all the kind of projects he's went into, you know, even down to the Hawkalicious hunt, for example. You know, like of course TMGL, TMWC, and so on and so forth. But before we then kind of move on to the future of TMGL, I also want to talk a little bit about opportunities, and that was one that was raised in a question that was raised in terms of the information that then came out from Massine, who of course did then announce his retirement recently from the game after the From Zero to Hero tournament project by himself, and of course the other associated staff members and that. Now, the one, of course, there's a lot of information in the presentation. He gave some 47 pages or something like that. Now, while I understand that is a lot of reading material, regardless, I would still recommend you check it out. Some a lot of interesting information in there. But if we focus on the one kind of part of this, now I'm paraphrasing a little bit, so I don't remember the exact information about it, but basically, it was along the lines of this. So, they had presented a project which was based upon an old kind of French Cup. They presented a project, they'd done a lot of the setup work for it, and they'd already approached a number of your kind of big setup organizations. So, we're talking like DreamHack, we're talking ESL, and things like that. And basically, they'd been in discussion with Nadeo since Giants Cup 2018, as far as I remember correctly. So, been discussion with Nadeo. Nadeo were in support of the project, helping out with whatever they can. You know, Massine and Co were keeping them up to date with the projects that were that were being worked upon and things like that. And the most interesting factor I would say on it, of course, shall we say, it was based upon the typical kind of style that Mass had then implemented in Giants Cup and Zero Hero and Musketeer League, whatever it was called, MML. Shorter, easier, more player friendly maps and such like that. However, based on a tech style. Now, it was then revealed in that he had set up a deal with ESL to then be bringing them back into Trackmania on, if I remember correctly, it was a multi-tournament deal including LAN events. If I remember correctly, I mean, I might be misrepresenting
I
this.
think it was 2 LAN events a year.
yeah, two LAN events a year then being conjoined. So it was in a format where it kind of carried on to the next LAN event. It wasn't just, say Gamers Assembly each year where it's just the first result's meaningless to the next. The linked LAN events in a sort of league format with some offline and online events that would contribute to a kind of a year-round experience, shall we say. And what stopped that was when ESL and Massine finally presented the project to Nadeo. Nadeo then, because basically for any of these kind of tournaments, ESL instruct that the prize pool has to come from the developer. So when ESL are hosting these tournaments, they aren't providing the money for it. It's, say Nadeo in this case. And Nadeo came forward and said that for this project, they were only willing to put €1,000 towards it. Now, that's on its own, I would say, rather controversial, but as was discussed in the very same presentation, that was because at the same time, Nadeo were in advanced plans of their own for Trackmania Grand League. So hence the resources were already committed elsewhere. But this is what I wanted to ask you about the question you put up to your Discord, as in, would you prefer to have Trackmania Grand League or not have it at all and not have Nadeo's involvement? How would you then kind of view it from this side of things? Because until, a few weeks ago, pretty much no one knew that there was a potential deal like this that would have had a lot of LAN involvement. It would have had, I'm assuming, involvement again from ESL once again, a familiar face in Trackmania. So now that we know that there was an alternative to TMGL, which I think is very interesting, because at the time people, felt almost like they had to get on board with it. In the earlier stages, there's a lot of controversy. Of course, again, people, when it's went forward, have joined on, they've got involved in it. But people felt like that was the only option. But now that we know that there was an option with the kind of ESL presentation, so to speak, what were your thoughts, first of all, when you heard that, well, the potential for that to have been brought back into Trackmania?
I don't think I'm too surprised that there was an opportunity for something else or some other organizers to join the game. You even had I think it was Coons was the first guest I had on the podcast ever. He said that he had proposed to Nadeo to have Trackmania being part of this esport thing hosting on TV, but they said no to that as well. So that there is opportunities that Nadeo is stopping isn't too surprising. And ESL, of course, would have been cool, but I don't think I don't understand why they couldn't have hosted both. I don't think the prize pool itself is too important. If you look at Trackmania's prize pool compared to other esports, I don't think, let's say, €5,000 and €25,000. If you advertise that as a part of the thing, it doesn't change the perspective of the the viewers itself. It's not gonna be like €25,000 gonna make a casual esport player being interested in watching this game because it's something else at stake besides €5,000.
Mm.
But if I could pick between something handhold between Nadeo actually hosting our own tournament themselves and a potential deal with ESL, I would still pick the handhold thing, because that is going to take place. That is something they want to host, instead of a potential deal where ESL has to work it out with Nadeo, and maybe that deal falls apart and then we're left with nothing as well. So I would still pick the Trackmania Grand League, but of course, a dream scenario would be both, where you have maybe 2 Trackmania Grand League events a year and then 2 ESL events a year. So this game actually has something every quarter.
Mm-hmm. For sure, because I mean, I guess exactly as you said there, the main issue is the question will always get asked as to why you can't have both. And that also kind of brings into one of the main criticisms for TMGL was, outside of a viewer perspective, it didn't bring much benefit to your normal player. It wasn't a tournament that your normal player can participate in. It wasn't a tournament that your normal player was going to benefit from, besides the exposure coming into the game, which they've now introduced, as I says, we'll go into in the future of TMGL. But I would have found this very interesting because the community has, well, shall we say the tech community specifically, has had a lot of problems with the TMGL decision. And not that I would then say that they should really start tearing themselves between two, fighting a 1-2 front, so to speak. Not that it's really that dramatic, but when we look at the amount of resources they did put into Trackmania Grand League, like they put a massive prize pool into it. They spent a lot of money on getting streamers to stream the event, and they managed to get it to Paris Games Week, which overall that's a lot of money to then be spent on their own event, which is great. That's a lot of lovely involvement. That's fantastic. But my then concern is, of course, through the last World Cups and things like that, they've had a history of not having that much investment to it. Like, if I remember right, TMWC was 5,000, if I'm correct, or
Yeah, TMWC was €5,000.
yeah, and how much did TMGL end out at? Was it 16,000 or something
No,
like that?
15 in the group stage and 5,000 for the just playoff, so 20 overall.
Right, so 20,000 overall. Now, I mean, I'm no expert, but at the very least, I would then assume that ESL were then not interested in this deal because they've then looked at, all of the sort of shit that's going to have to go on for them to be hosting these new events, and then saw that Nadal were only going to put 1,000 towards it.
Yeah.
Fuck that, which I would do the same if I were ESL. That's a joke, to be honest. I mean, sure, they were wanting to put their resources to something else, but if we simply look at the fact if you've spent well over 20,000 towards one tournament, why could you not have spent more than 20,000 towards two tournaments and have the involvement of TMGL, which has been great overall for the whole of Trackmania? That's primarily focused on getting your casual viewers in, your casual players getting interested in, having your multi-styles and things like that, and then having specialised tournaments for the community that's involved in the game already, be it tech, dart, full speed, RPG, it doesn't matter. Even if it's another multi-style tournament, get ESL involved in that,
Yeah.
The format, I think, was the most important thing with that. The two LAN events, the multiple online events and things like that. And without knowing the interaction between Nadeo, Mass and ESL, I don't know if that would have ever been a possibility. Maybe that's something they're trying to introduce within the new Open with TMGL, but I think, again, that was an opportunity that was missed, and I don't really see it. I would have been able to argue upon it if, say, Nadeo put like 5k towards TMGL and like, okay, maybe they didn't have enough money towards it, but the resources were there. They kind of shut that door on themselves, which I guess, as Kiesler kind of pointed out there, is kind of typical Nadeo. I mean, like when Hillis was coming out originally, when the TMGL kind of fire was hot, shall we say, he also mentioned that he could have at any time hosted a tech TMWC in 3 different countries if he wanted to, because he had the opportunity to do so. And whether I think that's a right or a wrong decision, of course, I mean, I can talk about it, but it's not really my place to then say they're right or wrong in doing that, because I don't know the inside. I don't know what resources, what pluses and minuses they have for it and things like that. But it does pose questions like, why are they turning down these? Why are these opportunities going astray? When, I mean, even me and you sitting here, the very first question on our lips would be, why can't you have both?
Yeah.
It's a question I'd be very interested to see them answer, basically. Not that I'm saying as, again, they should have done this, they should have done that, because, again, that's their decision to make and all the rest of that jazz, but it's an opportunity I can see that's again went begging. So, I mean, but that's something which I would say would bring us on to the TMGL future side of things, because with the announcements they've then made as to what's then going to be happening, so of course it was a beta season of which we experienced, which concluded in PGW, which is very important to remember. We are now on to TMGL Season 1, and also the newly announced TMGL Open, of which both of them will be featuring, I believe, the same structure, however, having notable differences in them. Now, pardon me, for those who are not aware, TMGL Season 1 itself, as you can see now, the Winter 2020 edition will be then starting off on January 5th. It will have 16 players in it, of which are all pre-selected and the majority of the players are pretty much unknown at the moment, unless you've got sources on the inside, shall we say. And the organisations, there will, as far as we understand it, be one organisation per player. Uh, a small potential for it to be, say, one organisation having two players. We're not entirely sure on that, as not all of the information has been made public yet. And as you see also on your screen, the Trackmania Open Grand League, which will be then starting on January 11th. Again, not all of the information is out towards this at the moment, but just simply if we isolate this to the fact that there's now a isolated league, an invitation only league, and an open league, what's your kind of first impression on that, just straight off?
Okay, so then we have to go back to when I actually got the information. I knew this before it was publicly announced that there was going to be a league with just invitational players. My first impression was, okay, here we go. It's going to be a bigger shitstorm when there was just country-based nations. But now that I had time to think about it, that maybe the motivation behind this is to motivate organizations into the game. It's easier to get an organization into the game if they say, okay, just get into the game. You are already promised a slot in the biggest tournament we have. You don't have to find a player and then hope he's going to qualify and then eventually kick him if he doesn't qualify. So now the organizations are already part of the biggest tournament. So now I'm if I was disappointed in the start, now I'm positive. So I basically went between night and day there as well. So I think that this is something that is worth testing out. And the good part about it is that it's going to be an open league where everybody can compete. So it's not like the beta season where if you doesn't qualify in the nation qualifier, you don't have to wait a year until you play the next qualifier and hope to qualify. Now you have an event that you can show yourself and maybe show yourself to the organizations that is eventually going to join the game. Maybe you prove that you are better than one of the 16 players who are pre-selected, and maybe then you get the opportunity to join an organization with a salary, and maybe that gives you more opportunity than you ever had in the game. So I'm really positive about it, but I understand that maybe some competitive players out there who has waited since February where they didn't qualify to the beta season. Now they can't even qualify to the main season itself. They just have to maybe pray on getting picked by an org that is big enough for Trackmania Grand League to get them into the main season, or they have to prove themselves in an open league that is obviously less prestigious than the open Grand League itself. But what do you think about it? Do you like it? I guess it's newer for you than for me. So what is your feeling about it?
Yeah, of course, you're the man on the inside. You've got it. You've got the news scoop first. But I mean, it's there's still a lot of question marks raised about it. I love the idea, though, to be getting a lot more organisations involved because even for example, when Berlin International Gaming get involved with Massa, that's another big organisation that's sharing or tweeting or this, that, and the next thing about Trackmania. So that's you that can only be a good thing in terms of how that then implements Trackmania as a whole. Uh, because of course, I mean, the whole discussions about multi-style to all the different community side of things is, that's a bit too much of a topic to kind of go into at the moment. But in terms of just simply how the new season is going to be looking, I like the idea to have all these organizations involved. However, I'm primarily concerned about the players and how that's then going to impact the Open League as an example of my thought path on this. So, if you're going to have it where one organization is going to have one player, then that already puts quite a big question mark on some very, very notable players. So,
Yeah.
you've got Gamers Origins consisting of Papu and Orel. As far as I know, Papu would be in because he's automatically qualified. Then you have on the other side of things, you have Solary with Bren and I was about to say Kappa there for some reason. Carl
Oh,
Jr.
breaking news.
Breaking news, yeah. So you've got Bren and Carl Jr. from Solary. So like again, that would be one of the top four from TMGL since Carl Jr. did qualify for the final, not participating already, which would already be a massive loss. I mean, we think back all the way back when to like TMPL season 1 when Pac failed to get into the first league, and it was bizarre. Uh,
Yeah.
so I'd find it very strange if one of them was having to go through the Open League. But again, you even look a little bit further down now that, for example, in a situation which has affected at least my team directly, Eminem recently signed Pac, and I would say Eminem had one of the strong out of the kind of organizations for the teams that are involved in Trackmania. I mean, I suppose this will just sound biased since I'm saying it, obviously, but Eminem has had a strong base of players who are very adept at multiple styles. So people like Alexor, people like Revolution, Beat also has performed well in a lot of these different styles. So it's like now that Pac's there, that means people like Revolution, Alexor, and stuff like that being my two most notable examples, having performed very well with Revolution being an example, and Zerator Cups and a lot of your different kind of smaller French tournaments. Alexor having good performances, getting to the Spheres Cup finals, and always a good performer in like your PEC when he played them, or your weekly cups. And this argument can be the same for a lot of different players out there, not just Eminem. I'm just, of course, saying them since I know them best. But that means what happens then to Revolution? What happens to Alexor? What happens to a bunch of these other players that are there on the cusp that maybe don't have representation or, things like that? I mean, as far as I've then heard the information from, these players would then get matched up to other organizations, which constitutes to a little bit of a grey area. How is this arrangement going to work between the players and the organisations, and most importantly, how's it going to work between the Grand League and the Open League? As in, what's the incentive for the Open League? Is it just going to be a prize pool? Are they going to take over the slots from, like, say for example, one of the players of which was announced was Kappa having been put into Veloce, or Veloci, however you say it. Of course, an organisation very, very with very, very deep roots in sim racing, and with F1 as well, if I recall correctly. And he is now their player essentially for the Grand League, as far as we understand it. Of course, without having the direct confirmation of the players list, we won't know for sure. But I can't imagine, that he's been picked up for any other reason. And of course, he is the winner of TMGL, so it's pretty much a done deal, so to speak. But I mean, it's looking upon it in that side of things, like, what's going to happen, say, if Kappa gets eliminated? Like, if he, shits the bed and gets last, does that mean if I win Grand League, I'm suddenly the lost Scotty? Like, what's going, what's going on there? Like, how's that going to work? Because unless these players are, but yeah, but unless the players are on some sort of temporary agreements with, say in this case Kappa and Veloce, or shall we say I was involved. I'm not involved. I would just clarify that. Say I'm involved with some random organization, and then what happens if I then go to a LAN event? Like, are they going to be tied to support me for that, or can they just say no? We only give a fuck about TMGL. Like, I like to see organizations getting involved. That's going to be great for the whole, the whole demographic. But the players are also as well my priority in terms of that, and I want to make sure the players will actually get something out of that rather than just participation in the tournament. I'd like to see that the organizations are actually giving the players some sort of benefit to that. But yeah, my main thoughts though with that is who is going to be the 16 players of which are going to be involved. I've got inklings as to who's going to be involved, but at any point, if you're going to have, because for example, at any time where any one team or one group or one person has decided who would be, say, seeded or picked for what, we look at the most recent example, Zero to Hero. A lot of people disagreed with, this player shouldn't have been in tier 1 or tier 2 or tier 3 or tier 4. And what you're mentioning is, I'd imagine the shitstorm you were thinking of is there's going to be a lot of people, or at least some people, who you're going to be thinking, why is that person there instead of that person? Or, things like that. What do you think about that kind of thing? I mean, has your expectations upon that been changed with what you were saying, when you thought more about it, or do you imagine that still being quite a big problem?
So my understanding as of to be after the grand final in Paris that okay, who is gonna be then in charge of picking the 16 players? He says that is just up to the organization, But obviously, if let's say that Solary kicks both Bren and Carl Jr. and says, "Hello, we want Eric Ola to play," they're obviously gonna say,
Hello.
"No, that is never gonna happen. He's not good enough." So they're just gonna say that if an organization picks a bad player, he's not allowed to play. But besides that, it's just up to orgs to find players and then join. So I'm not too sure about how many orgs knows about who is good. So maybe in the end, it's just going to be Softy and people in the Czech Mini Grand League suggesting to orgs that, okay, you want to come in? Here's a list of names that you maybe can contact and see who you can work out a deal with. But like you said, at the moment, it's just one guy basically who is publicly announced for that season. That is Kappa. That is the only player that is announced to be in the season, only one publicly at least. But what happens if, let's say that Eminem, who has a lot of good players, let's say that Pac plays the season one, Revolution plays for Eminem in the Open League, he destroys everybody there, but Pac is still one of the best players in the Grand League. Are then Eminem gonna be allowed with 2 slots in the Grand League, or are they gonna be like say, okay, Revolution, you have a case here. You have to leave Eminem and then find another org to make it. And if you don't find a new org yourself, then you're still gonna be in the open league. So it's just something new in Czechmania, something I never thought would happen. That it's gonna be locked to orgs to have players, and orgs can basically just kick players. And let's say that an orgs want to join the game for season 2 is a big org, and you already had 16 big orgs. Who is then in charge of deciding what orgs are going to be the one kicked out? Is it the player that is the worst? Is it the smallest org by the viewers? So yeah, we are in for a lot of stuff. I guess a lot of podcasts with SoftTB, a lot of podcasts with players, and a lot of just news coming out and how this is going to work out. Because I don't think anybody knows at the moment how it's going to work out. I don't believe in even Hewlett and Softy B knows how it's going to work out, and that is why it's maybe not safe to say that it's just going to be one org per player, because then it's just going to be bullshit if Bren or Carl Jr. has to be kicked out of Solary and eventually maybe being left out without org, and the same with Cap and or Papu and Orel. It's just going to feel weird that just because you make a rule that you have to have one org per player, that maybe some of the best players is not going to play in that season. So I don't think they know it. So I don't think anybody knows it. But I know one thing is that it's going to be fun to follow it and fun to covering it. And it's fun to have my job at the moment. I don't have to be worried about qualifying. I just have to cover what is happening on in Trackmania at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as from my understanding on it, I mean, of course, I've well, I would say I've not really got anything I can leak, so to speak, since I'm not on the inside. But from what I've heard from people, at the very least, it has been that internally there is allocated players. However, they are there's orgs and there's players, and it's waiting for them to be allocated to different people. As in, it's waiting for, say, fucking me to get allocated to, I don't know, Team Liquid, for example.
Hello.
Here we go. Yeah, that's what I think is that's what I've been told has happened at the very least. I mean, uh, of course, whether these people who are telling me all this kind of shit are correct, whether the information again that they're seeing isn't set in stone or anything like that yet. So again, with us discussing it from the outside, it is a bit strange, especially with what you were saying about the argument with say Revo in the Open League and the Solary guys and things like that. At least from the understanding I've got of at least with Revolution in particular, as far as I've been told, there has been a lot of players who have already been told whether or not they're being considered for a spot. As in, it's not just that these organizations are going out and contacting players out of the blue and saying, oh, we want you, for example, as not all the organizations, or at least as of when I last heard it, are for sure. So it'll be interesting to see who these players are and how they've then came to be the players that have then been picked. I'm sure there'll definitely be some surprises in there. I mean, at least as far as I've been told, there'll definitely be some surprises in here. But I mean, this isn't just for me to sit here and leak all the shit I know about it. As that's not That's not what we're here for. We're here to discuss what's going to happen.
Burn all bridges.
Burn all bridges. I don't have any bridges. I don't fucking know anyone. But yeah, but I mean, in terms of this as well, I'll be very interested to see, with the information being made public, if what I know is correct. If I'm assuming the same can be said for yourself, it's interesting questions to be asking about Trackmania. Like, this isn't shit we had to worry about like a year or two ago. Like, we've got too many organizations to worry about. It's a nice problem to have. It's but again, it's like when the beta season was coming about, it's an opportunity. What matters is how they're going to pull off this opportunity. Are we going to be sitting here in a year's time saying, oh, fuck, they should have done this or they should have done that? Of course, there's going to be drawbacks. There's going to be things that can be improved. But that's the whole process you go through for things like this. Is it's always improvement and it's always on to the next one. I very much hope that this is a long-term plan for Nadeo, as they were getting criticised for a lot of kind of short-term plans that weren't really taking into account long-term effects. So, I mean, I'll be very interested to see how this all kind of works out going forward. How most importantly, how the season one will adjust to some of the beta season's criticisms. Like, for example, as far as I've heard, there's not been a public map request this time. Of course, as we've discussed there, the players are going to be pre-selected. So, are we going to see a disparity in quality because a certain player was picked, say, for visibility, or a certain player was picked because he was the only one that a certain organisation was interested in? Are we going to see the same kind of problems that we had last season? Have they learned from what's happened? And if they have, how are they going to adjust from it? That's the questions I would then be saying. Is there any specific part of the beta season you're most looking forward to see how that changes for season one?
Well, the main concern was that the qualification was nation-based, but the second one was that the maps was built by Nadeo and not community members who has basically spent, let's say, the last 5 to 10 years about building maps for competitions. Now we have Hillis building maps, and I wanted that to change for the season one, but from my understanding as well is that it's not going to change. It's still going to be Hillis in charge of it, and then you have some builders building maps for it. Since it's not publicly, maybe they have asked some players to build maps, and maybe Hillis is going to build some maps. But why leave that up to the founder of the game instead of having people who has maybe dedicated their life in Trackmania to just building maps themselves, to just let them do what they want to do best, and that is to build good mixed maps, and maybe change this identity that maybe some people dislike, where it's one part ruining a whole map. So, and obviously, I also one of these campaigners for removing this champions mode, where 10 laps was just too boring to watch. Was nothing really fun. It was just waiting until someone failed, and then see how many points they lost. So I want close races like a cup mode instead of having a 10-minute race and 10 laps and so on. So change the maps and then change the format itself. So basically the whole competition, right? But yeah,
hello, new competition.
Some tweaks here and there, and I think that from what I hear, that maybe the champions mode and the round format is maybe going to change. That it's not going to be 10 laps, and but let's see. Like I said, I don't trust anything until it's publicly announced, because I don't think they are too sure about it at the moment. What is really going to happen? So yeah. And you, what would you change if you have anything to change?
Well, it's something I was actually want to bring up as a point, because I mean, all of the information we've got is kind of guesswork on this. I mean, I like the way they approach it. If they're going just purely from a spectator's point of view, as in they've got it where it's spectator friendly, and they're going all out for that. They're committed to that. Now, whether I agree with the champions mode and all the rest of that, I respect the fact that they're committed to it. They're not just they're not half-assing it. And it's like with what you were saying about Softy, and when you were discussing with this with them a while ago, is that if it did fuck up and they would, they could fall back on tech, but they've not done so. They're committed to the path they're on. They're still going, and they've put all their chips on the table for it, so to speak. Which again, I can respect that, but also, part of the attitude I personally have an issue with is, I mean, I suppose this might sound a bit controversial, and I suppose it's probably not the best thing to be doing, but fuck it. It's
Here
it's
we
my
go.
it's my podcast anyway. Uh,
Not
is
my.
I don't think Hillary. I like the fact that Nadal has an involvement. One of the things I loved so much about it was when Hillis was getting actively involved in discussions, because we can get an insight and we can get arguments. Well, not of course hostile arguments, but constructive arguments to what was going right and what's going wrong. But with his involvement in it, I think he needs to realize his own limitations and his involvement, which I think at the moment he isn't doing. As in, of course, players have in some cases, enjoyed some of the maps of which he's doing, but he needs to. And the way I would look at this from being a player who has enjoyed competitive map styles, not just saying tech, of course, I've played competitive dirt maps, full speed maps, multi-style maps, you name it. I'm a well-versed player in that, shall we say. The Our map makers are very, very capable of making entertaining maps. They're very capable of making very competitive maps, even in unorthodox styles. But I think it showed the limitations when he was coming out after the beta, well, after the start of the beta season, and basically saying people were giving him shit maps, or that some of the maps were shit, and so he felt he had to go and do them himself, which I think is a very stubborn way to look at things. It's a very bullheaded way to approach things, as in, like, if he is then coming out and basically looking at this saying my opinion is the one that matters the most, then he is. Then of course he is the biggest voice in this, being one of the ones with the biggest involvements, as being the publisher of the game, or well, not the creator of the game, shall we say? But he has also had a very negligible involvement in the Trackmania scene for a very, very long time. We've seen a few updates to the game, but other than that, I mean, the only time I'd seen Hillis before actually communicating in the Trackmania Grand League Discord was Gamers Assembly 2017. I didn't see him at any other events. I've not seen him interacting with people at any other events. The Nadeo staff are not really as active on the forums and side of things. So uh, I think with him then coming and taking over, saying, "This is my vision," I like that. If he has then a vision for how he wants to take Trackmania going forward, but with that vision, from you also need to take into account. Okay, I need people around me who understand the lay of the land at the moment, who understand what people are enjoying at the moment, what people want to see at the moment. What people are interested in at the moment, and I'm curious as to how much Softy's involved in that side of things, but from the attitude he took to the maps in the beta season, I don't think he should have a role in the maps going forward. I think, for example, Draconia has been very well versed uh, in their choosing of the maps for the LAN events. I think Softy done a very good job in the Trackmania Pro League, and he's actively involved in the Grand League, and has been involved for a great deal of time in these tournaments that he's had to worry about this kind of shit for. So why not utilize people like this more, instead of just saying, I know best, which I get the feeling is the approach. I understand it may be a bit more discreet than that, but that's the impression that people from the outside are being given, which, I mean, how do you feel about his direct involvement in this? I mean, I understand Kiesler's saying that he's not making full maps anymore, but I mean, as I say, my main issue is he doesn't seem to be realizing the limitations of his involvement in the scene, impacting the role he wants to play in this. So, what would you say about his involvement in this directly?
I think it also was good in the start that he was actually involved with discussion, like in the Discord, taking part, answering why this was his event. But I think after a discussion with him and Bergie, where basically they talked for a lot of hours about if Bergie would apologize for spitting in his face. If not, he would not speak again. And Bergie said, I don't have anything to apologize for, so why should I apologize? And after that, it was basically radio silent. So, but I also agree. Like I said, I don't understand why he is making maps when you have people that's basically dedicated their life in Trackmania to building maps. So maybe you should let people take charge. But this is maybe why we don't see ESL coming into the game. Well, why we didn't see the Trackmania moving into Netherlands TV. Maybe because Hillis wants to be in charge of everything. Maybe having the full control, having his vision, or maybe no vision. So it's basically zero or hero. So but hopefully Softy is able to help him there. Softy is basically someone we all trusted, or at least have trusted. In Trackmania, he's voted as the community member. We all, or he's a dedicated guy. He started from the bottom and gotten
Now he's
eventually
here.
into being one of the guys working for Nadeo. So not anymore a community member, but on Nadeo staff itself.
Mm-hmm. For sure, and I mean, as I say, I can only hope the involvement of the other parties around him does impact that in a way where, you know, where it matters. Because I don't like the idea of it being one way or the well, his way or the highway. You know, either it's Hillis's vision or nothing else. As in, we are going to see Nadeo's involvement and Nadeo's interest in this game being very conditional. As in, it needs to be by his rules, or he's not doing it. Because it, I mean, I personally leveled some criticism at Softy during the days of TMPL because I didn't think, no matter who it is, the decision making of one individual. Well, I don't think decision making on this kind of scale should rest on one individual. Now, I think Softy, outdone himself. He's done very well for his involvement in all of the projects he's had an act in. I mean that's easy to see because he got voted the community member of the year. He built up a great deal of goodwill with the Trackmania community for years. I mean that was impacted by TMGL, as a lot of people were against it, but he expected that himself. I'm sure, but uh, but I don't like the attitude of that. Yeah, that rubs me the wrong way because it's not a community spirit. It's not him being involved in the game. It doesn't sound like him being involved in the game for the game. It's getting involved in the game because I want, like, it's almost like the toddler's going to throw toys out of the pram if it doesn't go his way. Not that I'm likening Hillis, of course, to a toddler, just to just to make that abundantly clear.
Headline.
Headline, yeah. Scotty sacked from TM, but yeah, I mean, the way I look at it is that there needs to be more maneuverability in the attitude for that. There needs to be room for other people in this circle, as in either that's other members of Nadeo, that's other members from the community to have more of an involvement on this, because one point of view is always going to be limited. There's always going to be problems with it. There's always going to be positives to it that you don't even see yourself, and you need to be willing to listen to them. You can't just say, no, it's going to go my way. But again, just to make this clear, of course, this is me taking this completely from the outside, only seeing what these people have put in what these people have made public. I don't know if he's perfectly willing to, maneuver around people, or he's perfectly willing to adjust his vision, or if he is very strict in regards to this. I have absolutely no idea. I've never spoken to the individual personally. I've not seen any of his chat since the very start of TMGL. I've not had the chance to discuss it with him personally, so that's one of the limitations I'll have to accept. In the same way that I hope that he accepts the limitations in his own vision. But again, it's a question for the future, which again will be very interesting to see how that is answered. I mean, I can only hope that this is an opportunity that we'll end up making the most out of. But I mean, yeah, I mean, when I think there's easily identifiable ways already that information could either be better communicated or better acted upon. But yeah, personally, I would say I'm optimistic for Trackmania Grand League. I'm also concerned as to if it starts moving in a direction which does leave the rest of the competitive community behind, as the tech community was so outspoken about. The full speed community, the dirt community, and things like that. I'm concerned as to what's left for them. I'm interested to see if there will be projects that will involve support or at least involvement to tournaments for other parties, like your full speed community and so on and so forth. So that would at least be my rounding off thought for it, is that I'm optimistic overall, I would say, but anxious, I guess is the right word when if I would then describe it going forward. I personally will be making as much effort as I can in Trackmania Open Grand League, so I suppose there's your only headline that matters, besides me shit talking Hillis. But yeah, that's at least my view on it personally. I know a lot of people feel differently about it, but as I said, a while ago, I think it's important to give it your best shot and experience it for yourself. And again, it'll expose, the people in the community who are really interested in the competitive spirit, as you were saying. Like, it'll expose those 5 players at the top who really are here to participate, just to participate in the very best competitions. So I think that will be increasingly evident in the Open League if those who miss out on participation at the Grand League are so motivated to get in, where they will go stop at any means to do so. But that's at least my closing thoughts on it. I'm looking forward to it overall. I mean, I'm very sorry to see some of the faces go as a result of it. Again, whether I agree on them leaving or not as a result of this is irrelevant, I suppose. But sad to see them go. But looking forward to any possible new opportunities of which we might be seeing. Would you care to give us any closing thoughts while we reach the 2 hour mark, actually, on this?
2 hours? No, it's like 1:45. We have a lot of time to kill left, right? But yeah, I'm also positive about the future overall. That's why I basically put my life on a pause for a moment. I'm just working in a shop where I can travel as much as I want in case Trackmania has a lot of events. Then I can just say, okay, I'm gonna go, instead of having a real full-time job where it's gonna be hard to travel. But I'm gonna summarize it after Serrato Cup again to see if I want to stick around for another year. I believe I probably will, because Trackmania seems to be on a up. What to say? It's on the rise instead of going downwards like in 2017, where it was basically nothing happening. So yeah, I think it's positive, but I just wonder why we don't have a public map request, like Kisla is now saying that is one of the biggest maps mistakes, and he says that maybe Hillis is building some maps or parts of the maps itself. That's also something because the first LAN event of 2019 is coming up. It's going to be 3 months, if my math is serving me correct. That normally about that time you have a public map request for then the Lyon event. So is that also going to be closed for mappers to be asked to build maps for the event? Is it going to be the same map pack as Trackmania Grand League? So yeah, it's just a lot of questions heading into 2020. But that's fun for me because I'm going to be asking those questions.
Yeah.
And I'm going to work my hardest to get Hillis on a podcast in 2020. But at the moment, it doesn't look too well. But I'm going to try my best to at least get an interview wherever I find him. I didn't find him at the Paris Games Week, at least after
Ran
the
away from you.
over. So yeah, I think he ran away.
I mean, I kind of question, just not necessarily off topic, but how do you, because of course recently we've seen it as the kind of TMPL seasons evolved, and of course Grand League, especially coming into this season now, and what you brought up there with Leon. How do you feel about the fact that, because of course from the information I've been given, the Leon map style and all the rest of that is known, but it's not getting told to anyone. How do you feel about a lot of the information for these upcoming events, for these upcoming projects, are being hidden a lot more than we're used to? I suppose you'll kind of maybe even enjoy the challenge a bit more in the journalistic side of yourself. But I mean, how would you look at that in terms of what it means for what people are normally used to. I mean, do you think it kind of adds to the mystique and is a kind of positive side of things, or I mean, personally, I would look at that. I'm forever, as again I was saying, I was anxious. I'm forever concerned about what if this happens. What about this? What about this? We would barely even have to have the last half hour of our conversation if a lot more of this information has been made public. So how do you feel about things being more privatized within the past year or so in terms of how these tournaments are getting set up and such?
Well, I think if there is a key point that people wanna say that Nadeo is bad at, is communication. Should have communicated stuff better, and that is obviously something that I also share. It just a recent example was that they have these Trackmania shows, if I remember, where you can basically play with
Yeah.
your streamer. They
Mhm.
got information out there that spam wasn't part of being asked how to develop this, and that was the first information out there, and therefore that project got a negative impact out there. So maybe something like that should have been publicly announced, that they're searching for streamers to help, that you can contact them, so they seem to be open for ideas instead of just having close uh, calls or close discussion with some streamers. And then same with mappers now, that they just ask mappers instead of having everybody build maps and then pick the best maps. Like you said, maybe I tried to find this as a challenge. I saw that Kisla posted in the TMEC, the esport collaboration group, that it was announced, or people knew that what map style for Lyon is basically going to be. And then I said to myself, should I find out what is that going to be? But if I find out, what should I do about it? Should I then leak it to be like a breaking news guy? Trackmania is too small for me to just find out stuff and then leak it out to the public just because I believe it should be public. Because if I do that, I basically burn all my bridges. I need to have contacts with some people, and then maybe some part I want to have public cannot be made public by myself. I just have to wait for people to make it public. And maybe like Sinus Apple says, it's maybe they need a PR person that is going to be a communication between Nadeo itself and the community, so we know what is going to happen, why decisions are being made, why like there's going to be just selected players for Checkmania Grand League, and why is Hill is building maps instead of just having a public map request, and why the mappers who build maps are going to be asked. So I don't think that part of Jackmania is a great change from the previous, where basically everything was more open. Now it seems to be more and more closed in, and why it's a small game, why close it even more in, so you have people being frustrated about not knowing stuff. So yeah, just get help on the communication part. And if you need help, I know a guy. Hello. Putting my
already got
name
the
out there.
already get the contacts right here and right in the podcast itself.
But
But
isn't that the main part about, if you have to say that one thing that Nadeo could easily fix is to communicate with the Trackmania community?
yeah, it's been one of the main things that people have always been complaining about. I mean, one
Yeah.
of the primary issues which affected the community was the lap script being broken by one of the updates. I think it was the MP4 update, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And the amount of communication to that getting fixed has been abysmal. I mean, they ran a small amount of tests on it, if I remember correctly, but since then it appears to have been just simply a one-way stream of information, as in it's all the information going towards Nadeo and then Nadeo not responding. And I guess it's been a continuing theme of things not getting addressed, things not being responded to. And I mean, like, if you'll remember what it was like then, if you can imagine if you can remember the shock when they finally announced Mania Planet 4, announcing that they had fixed bugs,
Yeah.
like a problem that had been in the game since its existence, like, and it feels like that's how this is getting addressed. Out of the blue, out of absolutely nowhere, they come along and, oh, here's something, here's this, here's that, it fixes something. But then when it breaks something else, what what do we have that we can then go to about that? Who do we ask? Where do we bring this up? Where's an effective way of communication? It's like, I remember watching a lot of the CSGO discussions where people were having trouble within the game and they didn't know where to ask the questions. But when they did find out the ways to report the questions and report the issues where it was going to be addressed, problems were getting fixed left, right, and centre. Whereas people don't feel like that in Trackmania. People don't know where to post their problems, so they post their problems everywhere and they still don't get addressed. Like, that's not the right way to do things. Even if you're not going to address the problems, at least tell people why you're not going to address the problems. We're not going to address the problems because we do not have the manpower to do it, because we don't know how to fix the problems. Anything, as long as it's communication to make sure that people don't feel like they're being ignored or people feel like they're being left in the dark. But yeah, I mean, I suppose hiring a PR person might be an easy way to kind of scoot over that, but I think there's a lot of steps that need to be made to properly fix that kind of side of things.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. Because if you when you speak to Alinova, who is the wife of Hillis, it's so easy to talk with. She helps you with everything she can help you with. So
Mhm.
it doesn't seem like they don't want to help the community. It's just that maybe they need some help sometimes to maybe get it publicly out there.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of this, we've seen people going through the different methods of like trying to go through the forums and things like this, and even sending messages directly to these sort of people. And I'll at least go for my communications with Ali Noah have been relatively positive when I've been looking for, things for the little sub tournament I hosted, or when I'm hearing information about, how they've interacted on different tournaments. For example, they've sponsored Full Speed League, FSL, which has got a lovely prize pool and injecting a good amount of interest into the full speed community. Same with the dirt side of things, with them having a prize pool for a dirt tournament, with an online dirt tournament for the first time in quite a while. But I think it's when I'm getting communication back and forth there and it's relatively prompt and it's clear, it's concise. When I'm trying to find out information for LAN events, I know who to go to. When I'm trying to find out information about sponsoring for an event, say my event, if I wanted to host one, I know who to go to. I just don't get why it's such a problem when I want to know how to address a problem with the game, or a concern I have about a tournament that they're hosting or something like that. But do you imagine realistically this changing?
Mm, maybe if Jackmania actually gets so big that it has to change, that if Jackmania Grand League is going to be a success that brings in more people, if Serrator isn't going to bring in more people, eventually they need to hire more people. And they already hire Softy from the community. Maybe they're going to be hiring more people. They said that they have plans on hiring journalists to covering it. Hello. So
Hello.
yeah, just that maybe if Trackmania grows, they eventually has to hire someone, and then maybe they need to hire a communication guy, like a peer guy that is gonna be answering the public's questions, and you can ask him questions, and if he doesn't answer them, he knows who to answer within the system, so you don't have to yourself go through like 10 steps to find out a question that it should be relatively easy to find out. But at the moment, it's basically asking Alinova or SoftyB. At least from my side, it's just those people I ask if I have any questions, and if not, I ask players if they know something that I want to find out.
Mm-hmm. Just to round up on some of the questions of which we got, one of them was actually directly for yourself, if you managed to see that one.
Oh yeah, yeah, from Sinus Apple, or was there
Mm-hmm.
more?
Yeah, Sinus.
Oh yeah, about yeah, Hillis has not been active on Twitter recently, but one of the tweets he reacted to was me calling the Trackmania shows bullshit, which was because I was at work. I saw that spam was not part of this streaming project, and I thought, okay, they actually want to do something for streamers. They don't have the guy who's basically built up the streaming platform in Trackmania. I had to rush out. So I said, okay, this is bullshit. I didn't think too much about it. And then obviously Hillis answered, I think it was 3 or 4 replies on that tweet itself, answering why they did it, about why this project is the way it is. And then also he contacted me in personal messages that, okay, why do you call this project bullshit? And I agree that the word bullshit is probably not the right word. And I also think that that is a thing that maybe I should have gone to them and asked about this project instead of maybe like most people do, that they just see a headline and then make it even a bigger headline because you have contacts, you know who the people to ask. I know that it was Hillis, I was Derek between it, it was Alinoa. I could just ask them, and but uh, I think maybe I should be more careful about what I said, but not in the terms that I want to be pissing people off, because I don't really care too much about if my opinion is wrong. But once I use word like bullshit, I think that that is something that I don't want to be representative with. That instead of doing something, instead of doing research, which I pride myself in doing, that I just see a headline and then making another headline of it, and then but at least Hillis responded to it, so maybe
Yeah.
sometimes you need to create a headline. But I don't think he was too pleased with that tweet itself. But hey, I posted like 1,500 tweets, so one of them is gonna be what to say, not the best one, but the
Yeah.
power dynamics of the interaction between me and him, it can be weird that basically he is a CEO, but in all honesty, I think there is a lot of people in the scene that hasn't had the best connection with Hillis himself. Like Frostbuell was one of the most vocal guys against him. I don't think they were too good friends, but still, he was in the scene. He did a lot of stuff. So let's say that hypothetically, Hillis doesn't like me in a year or so. I'm still gonna be here. It's not gonna be because he dislikes me that I'm gonna leave. So I'm gonna state my opinions if I have an opinion, but hopefully more professional than the word use of bullshit. But I'm not scared. Come at me.
Yeah, I suppose it's between an inappropriate term,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
if we'll
It's
be
not
official.
professional at least.
Yeah, yeah, at the very least. But yeah, I mean, I was it kind of reminded me a little bit of the Bergie situation where
Yeah,
like out of the whole thing, it was almost ignored because like the argument against was ignored because you used a bad word.
yeah,
You know, it was the same thing with all of Bergie's arguments that went against. It got ignored because I think it was Bergie said that he was spitting in the face of TM, and as a result, you know, everything went to the wind and everything went out the window and all of that kind of shit. Which again, I don't really like that approach, but I mean, fuck it. I mean, if that's the way he feels that he needs to approach a situation, I mean that's how he's doing it. But it's disappointing when the communication comes from Niddy only for things like that. You know, like as we were kind of bringing up there. But to the uh, other part of that kind of side of things, I think it's very interesting with the power dynamic of that. It just seems a little bit weird from the outside to see like the CEO of you know the creator of this game, you know,
answering one guy.
like yeah, like you know, as if you've been like his child and he's like fucking you know like, chiding you for like saying a bad word in public, you know.
I had better hopes of you.
Yeah, you've disappointed me, son. You know, like
But in all honesty, that they have worked on a project aimed towards streamers that I think we all agree on, that is it good that they actually bring streamers into the game that maybe can be implemented into the game. And from their side, that the public reaction then is that spam first saying that, okay, this is weird, why I'm not in it, and then me saying it's fucking bullshit. So every reaction to a new project is, instead of being good, it's like we are shitting on it instead of trying to see the bigger picture. So we narrow it down to a small part that is bad instead of looking at a good picture. And that is also a story about Checkmate and Groundling. I think that many people based the criticism on the maps instead of the good part about Nadeo actually being involved. So instead of Hillis getting a lot of good things about actually coming into the game and hosting events, all of his DMs and every time he's on the Discord is why this, why that, and that. But we just want to help out, right? We just want to see good stuff we like, but we want to change the bad stuff so he can become better. It's not because we want to point out bad stuff so he gets a bad reputation or bad image. We just want to try to put a spotlight on bad stuff so it eventually can become better and eventually help the game. At least that's my point of view. If I see something that I dislike, I'm going to try to put my opinion on it, and that is for the greater good of the game to, at least in my mind, try to help out the game.
Yeah, because I guess it's the most important thing, no matter what the situation you're coming up against, is to be constructive. It's we when we were having the initial arguments about TMGL, there was always people going off the rails and being borderline abusive and things like that. And the most important thing is to be constructive in these sort of situations. I mean, don't get me wrong, some of the situations make you smile. When you see like I mean, shout outs to Tax and OK Boomerang
Yeah,
Hillis.
I don't understand that meme yet. I asked him on Discord, what is that meme? He got a lot of likes. He got more likes than Hillary. He got more likes than me. I was like, what? I don't understand.
I'll give you a crash course, don't worry. But yeah, I mean, shit like that makes me smile. But I'm also thinking, we like with the rest of the replies and stuff like that. It's important with such a situation, even if it's not being presented in the right way, which Nadeo is having a lot of trouble with. They're not presenting the projects in the right way. Then that's what we're here to help them work on. That's what we're here to then point out the issues. That it then puts the onus on them to do something about that, to listen, to even if they're not going to do anything about it, to communicate. And that I suppose that's the kind of running theme here, and I guess the message, if one of them ever does decide to watch this, and of course don't
2 hours in, I need to
and
check.
and don't ban me from Trackmania as well. That's a good message to put out. But yeah, I mean, the message as well as that is to communicate with the community, and that I think is the most important thing, and the thing that has been most missing from Trackmania all these years, and is the key ingredient to the success. Is not all of these people that you're going to get coming into the game. If you have your community in the loop, they're going to help you. They're going to help you in much more abundance than people who are coming into the game with absolutely no knowledge of it. That's at least my view on it. But I mean, I'm someone who's in the circle, I suppose, of playing this game all the time. But I mean, to bring on to another point there before I miss it, because it's actually up in the chat a little bit there. And since I suppose we have actually passed the 2 hour mark now, if I am correct.
Yeah, hello.
Yeah, hello. We're on for the long haul here, but to kind of bring us down a little bit into actually the ASAC podcast itself, since that's why we're here essentially. I mean, that's who we are representing here. As you see, the Electronic Sports Arena Challengers. Questions about them as themselves. And first of all, I'll make you guys aware that there is 1 week left for the competitive Q1 2020 to submit your maps. And this Wednesday at 8 p.m., there will be a second tournament of the ESAC autumn season, of which there has been prize pools up for, as well as, I believe, ESAC coins, if I remember correctly. And the first tournament took place last week, pardon me, which actually was won by Ager, if I'm correct in saying that. However, of course, encourage you all to get participating in the tournaments themselves as well. If you're a player, of course, the maps are already out there, for the autumn season. They're already there. The link has been posted in the chat for any who are interested in the stream at the moment. And of course, we want all mappers to get involved in presenting their work for not only tech, but they will be undertaking projects for the other disciplines as well. So this is a project which, again, ESAC is trying to bring to the whole of Trackmania. Again, something constructive that is trying to improve the situation in the community at the moment. However, the question then posed by Kisla, the thoughts on the global map pack and the lack of its usage. Personally, I support it. I support the global map pack. I think it's a fantastic idea. However, it's an idea which I think is always going to struggle to work in Trackmania because of the fact that competitions are always organised by different people. One of the prime examples is Zami brought up in the tournament which I was just casting, which was Trackmania Stars CPS 21, which is known for having harder maps, longer maps, and one of the specific maps had a bit of a reputation for being more difficult. And we're seeing even the top two teams the two teams on display, UB Team and M&M, making a lot of mistakes on that map. And I can only think in that sort of tournament, that is an absolute nightmare for anyone, in the lower divisions. There's going to be significantly more crashes. It's going to result in a lot of lost confidence in those sort of maps. And that is a prime place where you could open up a view for the open map pool. Like, for example, the Premier League uses the version 3 of maps, which are the hardest, which are the for the most experienced of players, and the divisions at the very bottom are using maps which are more suited to their skill level, so that they can have interesting and engaging matches. And I'm very disappointed at the complete lack of usage by tournaments outside of what ESCC are organising themselves. I'm not surprised, but I'm disappointed that for all of the opportunities that we talk about, even in this podcast, that there's such a lack of usage of the tools that we have, which present those opportunities. I mean, I don't know if you've kept yourself as up to speed on that, Mister, doing the research, but I mean, would you have any response to that at all?
Well, I don't understand why organizers want so hard on own map pack instead of trying to help out the online community at the moment, because the CPS is taking place at the moment, most prestigious team event at least for many years. I don't think too many casual fans even cares about this going on, because you don't have the biggest players there anymore. And something that could help is to bring in the likes of Pack, Carl Jr., Kappa, Massa, is to have them training one map or one map pack, and they could compete in multiple events instead of every time having to train a new map every week. This is not going to happen, and then you're going to end up with not the best players playing, and then the prestige is gone, the interest is gone, and you're going to end up with like the PTC, I think it was. We just have a POV of one of the players with 15 viewers of a grand final. Like I said to the Trackmania shows, it's bullshit. This is actually bullshit that more organizers doesn't use this, take this as a chance, test it out at least, instead of just having this, we want our own map pack, we just want to have it suiting our tournament. Well, you have three different levels of maps for one map that is possible to change or possible to test out. So yeah, if I was still hosting events, I would use all the maps, because it takes a lot of time to just put out a map request, find map testers, and all of that. So yeah, it's bullshit that more organizers doesn't use them. And it's something I hope that a story for 2020 that maybe ESAC Open or Global Open Map pack is gonna be something that changes the online scene, because at the moment it's, at least prestigious wise, it's just going downwards, and I think less and less casual fans cares about it. Even the From Zero to Hero, basically nobody follow besides the last days, because it was hard to follow. And yeah, hopefully it changes.
Yeah, I suppose. I guess the theme of this podcast has been that 2019 has been a bit of a year of contention, shall we say, and 2020 we hope for change, and we hope for positive change. Opportunities hopefully will not go astray, but I mean, exactly, Isaac, is one of the opportunities we have to make things easier, to make things better. I mean, exactly as you were saying there, a lot of your faces aren't interested in tech as much anymore, and I certainly don't blame them when you're having a few new maps each week or something like that in some cases, and you're just not as interested in them anymore. Or say, you're having tournaments that are on in times you can't play, team matches you can't play. Or example, in a team dynamic, you're having maps of which you've trained, and one of the biggest problems in team matches, and why a lot of people don't focus on them as much anymore, is you can be in a team with a good team, you can train a lot for a match and not play in it because you don't get the spot. Your other teammates get the spot. Whereas if you have an open map pool, or at least a shared map pool of some sort, then you have, like, straight away, okay, I fucked up. I didn't manage to qualify for the TMS, the two maps that I trained, for example. Then I can just go on to the solo tournament that they organise, and I at least get to play the maps. There's a reason for me having sunk so many hours into that. And I can only imagine there's a lot of players in that kind of position that would benefit from something like that, even if it's just CPS organise a team cup, and they organise a solo cup along with it. Because the only thing which would really stand in the way of that is having someone having to make more Discord channels. You know, like like the map request is done. You would need to maybe do a bracket within tournament for the players, have some sort of incentive, but realistically, I mean, if it's a tournament that's going on alongside, I mean, think that when there used to be the ESWCs, you would have training tournaments for the ESWCs with no incentive to them whatsoever, but the players and even players who were participating in ESWC would still play it. Like this way, you can have cross division play. You can play against people from Division 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can play against other people from, you can play against people from your level, higher levels, lower levels, whatever the fuck it's going to be. You don't even need to put up an incentive to it, and people will still play it. But this just makes it easier to draw more attention to your tournament. And yeah, it's bullshit. It's exactly our man here says. But it appears to be we have wrapped up the questions of which we have in the chat. They were mentioning about a Trackmania ladder, but I see that has been addressed. But talking about the future for our podcast at the very least, I mean, 2020 is going to present us a lot of interesting topics, and no doubt you'll see me here back, and certainly the invite will be out to our main man, Eric Holdall, as well. Have a lovely face joining us, and no doubt I'll be joining him soon within the next few weeks as
Let's
well.
see if you get that invite soon.
yeah, exactly. But that's it from me. I'd like to thank everyone for sitting with us. We've had a good viewer count for the full two plus hours we've been here. So credit to all those that are sitting through. And I mean, well, you've of course got something lovely to look at. I mean, it's still a little bit of a hard slog. You waving a hand there, I see you. But yeah, I mean. Of course, if you want to find me, if you want to contact me, it's TM Scotsman pretty much everywhere. For ESAC, of course, the links are at the bottom. You can see there on Twitch, ESAC TV, as you are watching us, or if you are watching us on the YouTube's ESAC Space TV, as well as ESAC.gg for the website where you can find all the information about the matchmaking projects, the map pool projects, as well as any upcoming or past initiatives we have had. And as well on Twitter, ESACGG, to keep up to date for any upcoming podcasts and the rest. But to sign us out, I'll let you tell us where they can find you and any projects, if you've got any coming up in future.
Well, you can find us in Lilyhammer the 5th of December until the 9th of December.
Hello.
So if you want to watch more of me and Scotty talking, I guess you can just find me on YouTube. It's going to be some live chats here and there. Some sober, some might not sober.
Patreon.
Yeah, Patreon content. But yeah, besides that, Twitter, I'm pretty active there for upcoming projects. I guess the most notable is something you're also part of, the Checkmania Awards. That's going to kick off after the New Year's for this time. So it's not going to be one for every episode of December. It's going to be one big episode in January.
Thank fuck.
Yeah. Besides that, I guess it's a record-breaking podcast here. I guess I had to be guest to actually break the record from Link when he was a guest, over 2 hours. But are we surprised? We like to talk, so I guess it's suitable that you have a podcast and I have a podcast. So in Lilyhammer, maybe we can beat it, even a 24-hour stream. If my phone survives 24 hours.
Shower stream.
But yeah, thanks for stepping up and inviting me to a podcast. I don't have to invite people all the time, and maybe I find an invite to you soon to my podcast and not only to Lilyhammer.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've done one before, so I suppose it's only fair for me to get a second.
Back in the days where I wanted to keep podcasts short, 2 hours later today.
Yes, and mine was the only one that was kept short. I demand a retrial.
Yeah, but yeah, we made up for it after that.
Of course, yeah. I suppose we probably conjoined, broke the records with all the fucking interviews we've had and all of that kind of stuff, and the hush hush drunk podcasts.
Never seen.
Never will be.
So Kappa in the chat, he also have an additional of like 2 hours. Hello,
nice. Never hello again, Prague.
Fuck it. And that's a funny story for people that might not know it. After the Checkmania Grand League was over, I went to visit some friends in Paris that I studied with in Peru. They said, yeah, we're looking for a meetup next year. I said, okay, where? Prague. I said, no, fuck no. Never again.
We already had we've already been there, done that, bought the
I've done
t-shirt.
Prague.
Prague is
done me.
Prague delivered the KO punch to old NMD and Scotty 0.5. So yeah, we need to find somewhere else to ply our trade, it must be said. But yeah, that's going to be us for today as well. Massive credit as well to Erwin Weber, who is behind the scenes on all of this with the fancy visuals and enabling us to do all this shit and wave our hands and, you know, laugh and talk shit about people. So all credit goes to him as well. But thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in for this. That's been it from me. I hope you all have a spectacular evening. What is, I don't know, 8 minutes left of it for all you European folks. Enjoy the rest of your night, and I hope to see you again for some more SAC podcasts, for more of my streams, for more of Eric Holdall's projects and content as well. But that is it from me. Good night and goodbye.